All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about the dawn of shopping malls, the mystery and intrigue of Heather Thomas, the undeniable power of the Orange Julius, and that time Chris bought a baptismal certificate from an adult bookstore.
So Jeff recently took drove down to a mall. We still go to a mall, this mall in particular, UTC, which is very modern. It's the opposite of the malls that are like going downhill and stores are closing. It's constantly expanding and it's constantly growing. And it's got everything from, an Apple store to a nice movie theater, ton of places to eat and all the, the department stores and the specialty stores, everything that a mall is supposed to have. But it's kind of fun, has a nice vibe, has a good atmosphere. First of all, I want to ask you, it's like, have you taken a recent trip to a mall? Why or why not? Explain, discuss, list in order. And that's not really an essay question, but what, again, if I were to ask you, Jeff, what's the current state of affairs for you and shopping malls? And then I'll kind of dive back in.
Yeah, so when I moved into the city that I live in here in Riverside County, this little city called Temecula, right, which is started out being kind of rural. We got a bunch of wineries out here, so people did start to migrate here, and it has grown immensely over the last 20 years, right, that kind of a place. The mall was a big deal, so I would say around 2002, when we first moved in, kind of the epicenter of this entire city was the mall. Right? It was everything. And it's got outdoor sections and little, almost like a downtown Disney section, right? Where you walk down the boulevard and you've got, just like you said, Chris, the Apple store. And of course, you have to have the P.F. Chang's and the Yard House and all of these, really fun places to drink and eat.
Islands.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
BJ's, Chicago Pizzeria. Right.
I mean, all of that is within, this monumentally giant parking lot, right? If you just hop in your car or you're willing to walk for just a few minutes, you can get to all those things. But it also has an indoor section as well, where everything is indoors. And I would say that we would go to this, right, the Promenade Mall, at least twice a month. We would make some sort of a trip down there. Sometimes it was shopping for gifts. Sometimes it was just hanging out with friends. But it was all the things a mall wanted you to do, right? Hey, come on down here. It's the weekend. Now, I would say within the last 5 years, that never happens. Like we never go to the mall unless, again, we have to get some clothing that my wife can't get anywhere else and needs to go to Macy's, or picking up a birthday gift and we don't have enough time to order it through Amazon. We got to actually go there and drag our asses there. And I think the foot traffic has gone way down. So this is one of those malls that's still kept up nicely. It's not boarded up. It doesn't look like a ghost town, but there are not a lot of people trafficking that mall anymore. So I don't know, man. The fact that University Town Center is still thriving as a mall, you tell me why, how?
Well, it's interesting. I think for a lot of those things that you just said, it does have the variety of basically anything you could want. And then there's even and it's an enormous space to walk around. And then they'll have live music, some dude banging out Brown-Eyed Girl on an acoustic guitar.
That's right. It's always Brown-Eyed Girl. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right.
Hey, where did you go? But this one is in first-rate shape. It's always expanding. It's got anything you could, I want pizza, or I want a burrito, or I want you can find it there. And to me, it's like, this is a pretty good experience, right? And my wife and daughter and I will go down there. You can't drag my son down there, but that's another part of the story. When he's in town, but we'll go down there, and it's kind of vibe. We'll walk around, and then maybe we'll get something to eat. And since there's multitude of options, you can eat whatever you want. Nobody has to decide on one thing, and it's just kind of like, all right, this is the mall. This is going to the mall. Now, it's not quite what it used to be as far as our personal experiences, and we can talk about that in a second. because we don't base our lives around it, or just like, hey, everybody. With us, it's kind of like we don't have anything to do. Well, let's go down there, or we do have something specific that we need, and we go down there. It's not like a peer pressure. We have to go to the mall because all the kids are going to the mall. It's nothing like that.
Right.
But again, and talking, and again, and I don't know if you ever had this discussion with your sons, who are definitely not of our, definitely not Gen X kids or whatever kids they are at this point. I don't even know what the generations are. My son, 21 in less than a week, thinks that malls are the biggest, most gigantic waste of time. Because to him, he's got his mall on his phone, right? He needs something, first of all, or they want to go to, thrift shopping or vintage shopping, which you're not going to find in a mall. So then they're going to go and find somebody's discards and overpay for them. And that's what they're going to shop for. But everything else, they can get it from Amazon, or they can get it from whatever website that they're currently looking for, like, again, vintage stuff or a pair of shoes or whatever they want. Why would I go to a mall? And we've even had this discussion to the point of like, I don't even want to bring you here because you're in that mode of like, as soon as you get there, you're like, when are we leaving sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which maybe says more about us than it does about him. I don't know. But thinking about it, it's like, all right, I see the point of, yes, because we can do just about anything we need on our computer, on our phone or our tablet, whether it's a commerce thing, whether it's doing work. People even, from what I've been told, people even date, right? Using their phone, right?
What?
I know. Yeah, you and I are before that, right? Ahead of our, that happened after, for us after we got married. But that's an entirely different podcast, I think. But conceptually talking about malls, and he's just like, I don't even understand the point, or I don't even understand why I would want to go here. Take it back. What are the things that when you went, let's say you were 13 or 14, what made you want to go? And what do you think back fondly of those experiences?
Well, the only reason I wanted to go was to, number one, just get out of the house and get outdoors. And even if the mall was an indoor mall, just have some kind of an adventure. And of course, this is the place that you go to meet up with friends. And what makes this place cool is you have no idea what other people you're going to meet there, right? It could be a girl that you like from school and you bump into them in the mall and that becomes its own adventure. Or it could be some super cute girl from who knows where, some other school, and you have some kind of a flirtatious mall adventure.
Ooh, living dangerously.
And then that night you go home and go, man, that was cool. Anything can happen at the mall. At least that's what you told yourself. In reality, not much ever happened. But I will say one of the coolest things was having in mind something that you did for sure want to get. And because you didn't have Amazon and because you didn't have the internet and nobody was going to effing deliver something to your house, it was kind of cool to go, oh man, I wonder if they have it. It could be a record, you've been wanting to get, an album, a cassette tape. It could be some article of clothing if you cared about such things. And I guess I definitely did. But then you're like, oh man, let's go to the mall and see if they have it. That was kind of cool. And then I love it, Chris, when you were talking about the food courts, just having all the different types of foods available to you. That hasn't changed. The greatest thing of all is back then, yeah, it's nice to go, hey, I'm going to have I don't know, Chris, name one thing that was in the food court back in the 80s.
Orange Julius.
I am so excited that you said that. And I want everyone that's listening in to know, I did not tell Chris to say that. That was the only thing that I wanted to eventually talk about was Orange Julius, because to this day, I just don't think there is a flavor that is more distinct, that instantly takes me back to really cool memories of the 80s than taking a sip off of a cold Orange Julius. And you can still get them at the DQ, Chris, which of course was Dairy Queen back in our day. But the Orange Julius was my dream come true, man. Sipping on an Orange Julius and watching people walk by, man, that's cool. But I also, of course, today in the food court, love the fact that it solves a giant problem. What do you want to eat? This. Awesome. Go for it. I want to eat this. What do you guys want to eat? This and this. Great. Let's all split up. And now we're only 50 feet apart from each other, and every single person gets what they want. I honestly just wish there were more food courts. I guess nowadays you would call it a strip mall, but the food court is so cool, man. This little self-contained circle or semicircle where you can just choose 8 or 9 different things, all of them horrible for you. And that's the whole point, right? I'm going to go have Panda Express. I'm going to wash it down with an Orange Julius, and then I'm going to eat a Wetzel's pretzel, and fuck you. That's what I'm having today. And all of it is within 30 to 40 feet from me right now in my giant gob.
When you talk about the food court, that may be, to this day, the most significant cultural contribution that the shopping mall culture made, right? Because where else do you see food courts? You see them in airports.
Yeah.
You see them at like sports arenas where they have, okay, let's go. We're going to go to a concert or a game, and then there's all the places are sort of in the same spot. They have them in Vegas, where it's like, well, that hotel's got a food court, so you can do that very same thing. It's like malls may go away, food courts in some way, shape, or form will exist.
By the way, Chris, remember the first date, like when you were a kid and you took some girl to the mall,
or you met her at the mall, right?
Meeting a girl that you had arranged to meet at the mall. That was fun. But even more fun was stumbling onto somebody, you kind of hit it off, and then you're spending time with them at the mall. That was the best. But how cool that eliminates one of the biggest date issues, right? On meeting up with someone and having a date is, where are we going to eat? Does she like this food? Am I forcing this on her? I don't really like this food. It's the greatest. It's like, hey, spin the wheel, man. Get what you want. I don't know. Food court is so nice. I love them.
Does she like hot dog on a stick?
Let's hope so. Wait, what? What happened?
Yeah, no, nothing. I'm moving on. Orange Julius is, I get one when I go to the fair. When we go to the Santa Clara, they still have them in that enormous, food area. You can't find them in a mall. You certainly can't find them at UTC. Believe me, I've looked. But again, I was a fan of the strawberry Julius. But anyway, the orange Julius. But again, I think you're right. The food court, the nice sort of, center of activity for whatever mall to meet up, to run into people, to go before or after a movie, or we've been walking around for an hour and now I'm hungry and we're going to go and maybe I'll get a pretzel or, like I said, the aforementioned corn dog or something like that. But those, like I said, those were the staples. They're still there. And I think now they're even a little bit, some of them are a little bit fancier because you could get like Indian food. We could not get Indian food in a food court back in those days.
Oh, no. Vietnamese.
Sushi, yeah. So it's definitely shifted. And that's good, right? Because I think that was a part of probably what they needed to do to survive. What else? I mean, because I think of that, I think of the things that I went to the mall for as well were the other, is there a store or even a particular product or something that jumped out that you were looking for? The one thing I always think of is those random, and they're still around and I think they're Hot Topic or whatever, and these sort of random ones where it's like, man, if I wanted a poster of Linda Carter, I went to the mall.
Oh, yeah.
And there was the store. Some of them were the record stores. It might have been a Sam Goody or something like that. And then they had those weird sort of, those vertical, they were like, I don't even know how to describe it, right? A sort of display where you would flip through the posters and then you would find the one you liked or, oh, they don't have it. You look for that too. But, those kind of things, like those were the things you couldn't get. Now, again, you can dial it up and find whatever you wanted. But that was like, oh man, look at this cool poster of the Cars. And I'm going to buy this and put this on my wall, and those were the things that were very unique to the mall.
Yeah. Chris, until you said it, I completely forgot about how cool that was. Normally, correct me if I'm wrong, normally the poster section was like almost like a big cardboard box, right? And it was filled with tubes.
Mm-hmm.
The tubes were, of course, the posters, but you could also flip through the actual posters on almost like a Rolodex card, right? Where there are these large, cardboard backings, and you would just flip through it, and you would see what you want, and then it would have a little number like A17, and then you would go over to the to the bin and grab the tube. And did it ever happen? Yes, Chris, it absolutely did. Jeff purchased, something weird's going to happen when I refer to myself in the third person. Jeff wanted to get the super awesome Devo poster, the classic poster of all of them and Mark Mothersbaugh's holding a whip, and they're all wearing their red energy domes. And what does he get? He gets a poster of Heather Thomas, right? Because that's what accidentally, I guess, was put in that tube, or they mislabeled it. And I hadn't heard of Heather Thomas. I guess I wasn't watching Fall Guy or something. Like I just, for some reason,
Oh my God.
I didn't really know. I know, right? Well, I mean, this is before I was introduced to her, I guess, on the TV. And I opened up the poster and I'm like, oh man, they screwed up. As soon as I unroll the entire poster, I'm like, oh shit, I guess this could stay. Yeah, I could see this being in my room. Okay.
What was it? Was it the pink bikini standing in a hot tub poster?
Well, there was a bikini, as I recall. So it was probably that one, probably the pink bikini. Yeah. And I remember somebody else coming into my room later on and saying something like, oh, dude, what are you, in love with her? What are you going to marry her? You know, as kids do. And I thought to myself, man, if I could, I think I might.
Was that an insult? Were they cutting you down? Were they basing on you, Scott? Right? You would say, "Are you basing on me, Scott?" You know, it's like, sorry, I don't mean to call you Scott.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You basing on me? Oh, I totally forgot about that expression. Stop basing on me. And so then the next time I went to the mall, I honestly didn't care about the Devo poster anymore. I had switched my focus altogether. But I forgot all about the posters. Of course, that was a big deal. The other thing was, and this is more high school, Chris, this wouldn't have been junior high school so much. I didn't care what I wore in junior high school. But by the time I got to high school, I started caring a little bit. And again, I think we've talked about this. I weighed, I think, 125 pounds soaking wet as a 6-foot person. So to say that I was skinny would be an understatement, pretty emaciated. And so, of course, heroin thin, right?
Heroin chic,
excuse me. That's right. So I loved all of the super over-the-top, new wave, punk rock clothing to the point of ridiculousness, right? Did I have parachute pants? We already talked about this. Did I have skinny ties? Of course. Did I have the pink plaid crazy shirts with weird designs? You bet, man. Did I have the belt that looked like it came off of a 1972 Chrysler's seat belt? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I did go there to shop as well for clothing. By God.
Did you also go buy the little round pins that were about the size of a quarter, and put those on your jacket as well, right, or your lapels? Do you still have some? I might still have some.
In high school, my girlfriend loved those things, and she would absolutely hunt those things down and collect them, right? I think her favorite bands were The Police, and a few others, and I believe Rick Springfield, right? And some folks like that.
Working class dog.
But she had great taste, and she would get really cool pins and wear them. I never got into that. But Chris, do you remember this? If you went to a Sam Goody's or a Licorice Pizza or a Tower Records or Lou's Records,
Warehouse,
dang. Oh, I thought I got them all. All right, there's 5 right there. They would have plastered on the wall, not posters, but maybe you can help me remember what these are called. It was a square piece of cardboard.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's called a record flat. F-L-A-T.
A record flat. I knew you would not let me down, Chris. A record flat. And all it was oftentimes it was the artwork from the album cover.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was some other type of artwork. Sometimes the artwork was meant to be put into a giant mosaic on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But if you liked REM, for instance, and you liked the album Rumors, this would not be a poster of that album cover. It would be like a 10-inch by 10-inch square thin piece of cardboard with that artwork printed on it. And I learned from a buddy of mine that if you just ask the guy behind the counter, hey, do you have some extras you're about to throw out? You could just start rifling through that shit. And oh man, was that cool. That became a big deal to me to plaster my walls with that stuff.
Right. I think the cool stores, some of them, because you know how you'd walk into a record store like that and there'd be, and you'd walk right to the right, there'd be the free, tabloid magazines or flyers for, there'd be like a bunch of free stuff right by the door, right? And promoting something, or the Reader, something like that. And like the one that I want to say was the Warehouse, they would put the record flats, they would just put them right there in almost like this little tiny bucket/bin. It was like Tears for Fears, okay? And I wasn't a huge Tears for Fears fan, but it was just like, oh, well, I grabbed because it was the same, I grabbed like 4 of them and they went up on the wall because it was cool, or my perception of cool. Let's make sure this is clear, but that was every time I went in. Other than that, there was never anything of any value. I didn't want to put Scorpions or something like that at that stage in my life. But yeah, the record flats, that was a cool thing.
Chris, I'd like to interject and say that there is never a stage in life where it's okay to promote the Scorpions. There is never an okay time. If you're promoting the Scorpions, I don't know what I can say to you. If you haven't learned what good music is by now, we have nothing to talk about.
48 episodes in, and I have yet to threaten to rock you like a hurricane, but I won't, okay?
48 episodes in, and we just lost a third of our listening audience by Jeff being a dick.
No, so that whole part, that those record stores, and again, the vital part of the mall, and I almost think like if you were going to the mall, and especially because you were a kid, you weren't really there to shop, right? Because number one, you didn't have any money. All right, or number two, you weren't gonna, unless you really had saved up for something like you said, like a Devo poster that inadvertently becomes into, the day you became a man when you realized that you liked Heather Thomas on your wall.
I never did get that Devo poster. I was perfectly happy with my purchase. Yeah,
but you thrived and you survived, and Devo is still to this day a much bigger part of your life than Heather Thomas ever was.
I would say she lives rent free in my head more than Devo does. Yeah, but yeah. If there was a Heather Thomas concert that I could go to, I would probably go.
So again, like I said, unless you had a real task, and unless you were going for back to school shopping, which unfortunately usually it was your mom that took you there, and there was a plan to go and get these clothes or whatever. So you didn't have a lot of free reign, but you went to the mall, whether you went with your friends or you went to meet friends or whatever. And so there were the stores that you were going to, it was almost like a strategy. Well, yes, we're going to go to the Warehouse, and we're going to go to Oshman's.
Wow. Chris, nice. Ding, ding, ding. I have to point that one out. That is a nice pull.
Again, the bookstore, it was just this sort of strategy, whether it was, I don't want to say that it was crazy shirts, which it was just like, hey, I'm going to go get my Keep On Truckin' shirt or an I'm With Stupid shirt or something like that. And again, it was just like, in retrospect, how did these stores actually survive as long as they did? Because you never saw somebody, walking around with like bags and bags of stuff from Crazy Shirt, did you? But the one thing the mall thing that always kind of blew my mind was music stores, right? And specifically, there'd be some guy with a piano or an organ, and that dude's just out there, I don't know, playing Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue or something to that extent. And that was his job. And it was just like, you never saw anybody. Did you ever see anybody like pushing a piano out of that store or walking around? And it was just like, man, who did they sell one piano a week and they stay in business or something? But they were there. It was a presence. It was, again, just you check it off as you were going toward, going through the mall. Again, he didn't stop there, but damn it, you were aware of it because, again, some guy was there like, hey, look at me, one hand on the organ.
It really makes me wonder, Chris, you absolutely have done it. That blows my mind thinking back on the piano/organ store.
Music Mart? I don't even know what it was called.
You're right. To my knowledge, I never saw anybody rolling a piano out of that place. Well, you've done it. That song reminded me of my youth. I'm going to buy this $7,000 grand piano, and I'll take it with me right now. Just roll it over here to the Green Burrito. No, sorry, I didn't have that back then, but
it's like you never saw, like I said, that looked like the loneliest guy ever, to the point of you would skip it. And unfortunately, you'd have to walk by it because I think they paid for good location, right? It would always be like on a corner. And then again, you could hear the guy, banging through, like I said, bad Leroy Brown, something to the effect of like, hey, look at me. And it's like, okay.
or the Piano Man or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, all the songs that you have to play when you're trying to demo the piano. And to your point, there is nothing sadder. And Chris, I can only imagine now that I'm thinking back on it, when they actually did sell a mother effing piano at one of those locations. Do you get the idea that they rang a bell just like Farrell's ice cream parlor?
It's like the zoo. Farrell's, exactly.
Yeah. Ding, 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 ding. Oh my God.
Some guy comes out of nowhere dressed like Beethoven, and he's got the wig and like the ruffly shirt or something like that.
Strobe light. Yeah. Disco ball drops from the ceiling.
Right. And you're right. And confetti. Right. And it's just like, yes, we can pay our employees this month because we just sold a baby grand piano.
Well, I mean, looking back on it, Chris, I feel like those stores were a front for some other illicit operation is what it really was, right? Selling the actual piano was the last thing on their mind. They just don't want people sniffing around and asking questions.
It was like the guy that sold, women's dresses in Goodfellas. Like, yeah, go in the back, man. It's like, just go ahead. And he's either running numbers or, laundering money for the mob or something. You're right. It's just like, oh, yeah, here, come in, pretend you're buying sheet music, and you're actually dropping off a brown paper bag of cash.
And Chris, I'm going to rabbit hole us for 1 second. My really good buddy, Jonathan, who you and I both know from high school, Jonathan and I once went to downtown San Diego, and this is back when it was very seedy. It was a rough area, right? You had about 1.5 blocks in downtown San Diego that were safely navigated by your average,
sounds about right,
easy to beat up high school kid. And John and I, we were just taking photos, like black and white photos for like an art project that he was doing. And one of the storefronts, which now would be considered the gas lamp area, right? This super high-end, gentrified, amazing area in downtown San Diego. It was, Chris, get this, imagine a storefront where the glass showcase that you walk by is one teeny tiny diamond ring in the window. Chris, the entire showcase, understand, is a little tiny jewelry box that is opened, and there is a single diamond ring in it. If you were to walk in the store, this is what you would see. Nothing except a card, like a card table, 2 folding chairs, and 2 of the most Guido mafia-looking dudes you have ever seen just sitting there, just fucking daring you to come in. And to this day, whenever I think about, places that were clearly a front for something else, that's all I can do is see that location. It's like, I so bad wanted to go in and go, yes, how much for the diamond ring in the window? Just to see what they would say. It's not for sale.
Well, that was the code word, right? Do you have any more rings? And they'd go, yes. And then, right, or they'd usher you to the back. That was the thing. And again, the malls, if you look at it, there was also, and I'm not even sure if it were the stores, maybe it were the record stores, or maybe they were like the poster places that, for lack of a better term, they were referred to as head shops, right? And there was a section in some of these stores where you had to be 18 to go into a certain part of the store. And it might even been like a door, if I could think about it, because it was like, and then you could see like that's where they sold the bongs, and
right.
That's where they sold roach clips, and scales, and anything that I think they referred to as paraphernalia, right? But I think those were literally part of the mall. I mean, it was like sort of a sub part. And like I said, you had to be 18 and you had to be like buzzed in, but some of them you can even see it, right? It was behind glass. It's like, I can see what's going on back there, but I can't go there because I'm only 16. And I think that was sort of that was obviously of the era. And then I think, right. And I think then when you went to those stores, that's where they also had like the black light posters and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of, it definitely, it's like you're walking through the back of the store and you would come into that sort of merchandise.
Now, today, those two concepts split off. You have the blacklight poster, I'm with stupid, risque novelty items that are kind of R-rated. That later became Spencer's Gifts, as we know. And who
Sure.
knows how they stay in business, but somehow Spencer's Gifts, it's the most regrettable purchase you'll ever make. It's always the place you go to on a whim to try to get some kind of a birthday present for somebody that's kind of hard to shop for. And they open it up and go, what the fuck did you give me this shirt for? Why? Why did you do this? I don't want a mug that also makes a fart noise. Why? And it made sense at the time, but, you know, that's Spencer's Gifts. Or the other thing nowadays, which is just a smoke shop right now, especially here in California, they don't have to hide it. They don't have to technically call it paraphernalia. It's like, no, bro, like you can actually buy bongs. We're totally open about it. Oh, and pot, right? You can just buy pot. When I think back to my high school days, and I think about all of the people and my friends and people that you knew that might have gotten busted or gotten a ticket or gotten in trouble with their parents because they discovered, Chris, the equivalent of 1/100th of an ounce of marijuana in a little baggie in their, you know, car or in a, like I said, a sandwich bag. And today, that's just an insignificant amount. And now you can take a vape pen that tastes like blueberry crunch, and it's loaded with 1,000 times that potency of THC. And these people are doing it on their shift at Home Depot as they're driving a forklift. You know, it's just, man, I'm sorry, I got on a very big tangent there. But yeah, that's how things kind of evolved over time, I guess.
Right. And like I said, these things that were out in the open, but not quite. Right. I mean, I think that's the whole thing. Like I said, you had these, like, we knew they were there, you know, just like the pornography at 7-Eleven. It was just like, but we can't, we know it's there. We know where, you know, how to access it at some point. It was also the same thing when you took a trip. And again, this was literally, as you know, the middle of the end of our teens, when people started renting videos, right? And started going to, and I want to say it was like, I think there was a precursor of Blockbuster called Video Library.
There was, yeah.
Right. And you know, then the ones that would kind of pop up, and then eventually Hollywood Video and all these places that would come up and pop up, and you could go and rent a video, and then eventually rent a DVD, and then we all know what happened there. You know, there was the same thing in those stores or in those rental places where there were the videos where I can go, you know, rent, I don't know, The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again.
Wow. Well done.
First video we ever rented, or I ever rented on my own, was a movie called Zapped. Zapped.
Gross, Chris, because you know my feelings about Scott Baio.
And Willie Ames.
Willie Ames, yeah, he became insufferable later as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay, because we rented Zapped because we had heard, who also was in Zapped? Can you think of a female?
There were some pretty cute girls in that, and I don't recall who the main person is. Because of my aversion to Scott Baio, everything else is clouded.
She wasn't the main person,
Oh, okay.
but she was sort of like the bad girl, and so she was sort of the antagonist for the nice girl, right? Heather Thomas.
No. Okay. Wow. You see how my blinders were up with Heather Thomas? I didn't know she was in that. I didn't know.
Exactly. And so we rented Zapped because we had heard there was like a scene, and let's just say, as it turns out, they used a body double for Heather Thomas. It was not actually Heather Thomas. We rented Zapped from Video Library, and we're horribly disappointed in not only the plot, the pacing, the acting, the script, the lighting, right, everything about it, you know, the set design.
Wow, you're getting really technical for Zapped. Choreography.
I don't recommend it. That was, like I said, but that experience of renting that. But again, remember, so you would go and you'd rent it. Let's say you were looking for Zapped, and let's say, God, I can't believe I'm using Zapped as an example. But you had the empty Zapped container, and then you had the actual movie itself right behind it, right? And they're like, oh, we can get it. So nothing would be more disappointing. Like I said, you were going to rent, you know, you were looking to rent, I don't know, something else from that era. And Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Okay.
And they didn't have it wasn't there.
What do you do next?
Well, you would go up to the front.
That's right.
To see if anybody had returned it.
There you go.
And maybe you'd sort of rummage through, and hopefully, and if they hadn't, like it hadn't been put back on the shelf, music, that's when you'd hear the Price is Right, sad trombone music in your head. Bum, 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 bum. And and now I got to go pick something else.
Yeah, it was a thing. I mean, video stores and video rental was such a huge thing. And Chris, we were talking a couple episodes ago, I think it was a couple episodes, the Valentine's Day episode, about the awkwardness of going into a Victoria's Secret, especially if you're our age, right? To try to shop for something intimate and having to deal with, younger girls that are helping you. And you're like, oh man, this is just awkward. You just don't want to do it. But back then, for those that don't know, if you wanted to get a adult movie, and by adult, I am talking about X-rated, and you were at some sort of local video store. I don't know if Blockbuster did it, but, it was always interesting to me that there's this curtain, just like we were talking about with the Mafia front, where there's a room in the back. There's a curtain.
The curtain.
Yeah, that, and you would see people just going in and out of those things. And I know what you're thinking, Jeff. Geez, Jeff, how do you know about that? But dude, you would see people coming out from that curtain. And the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, those must be employees. But no, they're always holding just a stack of videos. It was never one video. It was
wearing a trench coat.
10 videos. Yeah. And then
big weekend on them.
I think I just really admire their confidence as they slap those down on the counter and just like, yep, ring me up and I'll be back for more. Just like, wow, man, that is pretty ballsy if you don't mind the pun. It's like, dude, hats off, I guess. Good for you. But that to me is so funny. And Chris, you mentioned Video Library. My wife, she actually worked at Video Library. That was one of her jobs. As I mentioned before, we used to work at a movie theater back in the day together. She was the snack bar girl and I was the usher. It was meant to be, right? A Hallmark movie. But later she worked at Video Library, and it was so cool because she would get discounts on the rentals, and we could get the rentals that were sold out or hard to get. And it was a lot of fun.
Put them aside as soon as they came in, right? It was just like, this one's not going up on the shelf, that kind of thing. That's an interesting progression for her to go from the movie theater. It's like she saw the future, right? She went from the movie theater to the home video world.
And I will say nothing cracks me up more than the time that we left one of the rentals at our house and forgot to return it. And what had happened was it fell somehow between a couch cushion or something silly. And by the time we realized it, we're like, oh man, we should try to return this. And we're doing the right thing, right? So we go back to the place and go like, hey man, I don't know how long ago we rented this, but here you go. And they were giant dicks about it back then, man.
How much did you owe?
Oh, it was something like $475 is what they were trying to do. Now, this wasn't Blockbuster. This was like, John's Almost Hollywood Video Store and DVD rentals and bike alignment or whatever the other thing he was trying to do there.
Donut shop.
But yeah, and of course, our reply was, yeah, here's the video, dude. If you want to try to stop me as I walk away, go for it and send the bill in the mail, but I'm not fucking paying you $475. So nice try. But so the library was definitely not like the, library that we were used to, where if you forget a book for a really long time, they're just grateful that you finally returned it. These guys were literally going to try to take away your car because you still had a copy of The Officer and a fucking Gentleman or something, right? So anyway, I just thought that was funny. And Chris, I don't know if you remember this, but we had the big Y2K scare, of course, much later in 1999, and it started around 1998. Everyone thought that as soon as we get to the year 2000, all of the computers are just going to go haywire. They're not going to know what to do.
They'll go to 1900.
Their timers or their clocks don't go up to that many digits. Apparently, nobody that made those computers ever thought we would make it to the year 2000, I guess is what happened.
Apparently not.
And so we thought that airplanes were literally going to fall from the sky, nuclear missiles were going to automatically launch, and it was going to be Armageddon. And then the next thing you know, it's Night of the Comet, right? So,
oh, nice pull.
I was holding that one, Chris, for a while, Night of the Comet. And here was what happened the next day. Nothing happened the next day except one little story, which said a guy who had a video at Blockbuster accidentally got sent an invoice for $999,999.99. And you see the guy holding up the fake invoice and going,
That is awesome.
you know, that was it. That was the big Y2K fallout, was one dude got overcharged for a video.
That's amazing. Again, I'm dying to know what the video was. Would have been must have been like a hell of a rental for that much money. But I think we kind of have that now when you think about, remember, so that whole perusing of the video store, which went into the early 2000s, right? When you're like, hey, let's go rent a video. Again, it became renting a DVD and everything else. And I don't know, you probably did it much like the food court, right? Where it's like, you go check out what you want to check out, and I'm going to go check out what I want, and maybe we'll get two, right? I'm sure you and your wife did this, and we'll meet back, and it's like, hey, we're going to rent these, and we got the weekend to watch whatever. And I think we kind of have that now as you're sort of clicking through, like, what do you want to watch on, whether it's Netflix or Prime or Hulu or whatever your streaming service of choice may be, Shudder, to that sort of, and I just like you would be in the video store for a long time, or you couldn't agree on something, or you couldn't find something, and everything was out. Now I think I saw something where the average person or couple, like on a weekend night, may spend like 40 minutes scrolling through the looking for something to either watch or not even necessarily watch. It's something you can agree on, right? To the point. And if you haven't even thought about that in advance, in one cases, it's just like by the time you get to it, it's like, I'm ready to go to sleep now because I just used, 40 minutes of Prime between 9 and 9:40, and I'm old, and I'm good. I don't know if I'm going to make it till midnight to watch this thing, but I can try, right? So, so we sort of have that now. It's the evolution of, that sort of process. Like I said, much like the food court, we've got a lot of choices, and hopefully we can find something for both of us. Every mall, I think the funny thing about the malls is if you were to go in blindfolded, and let's say it was an indoor mall, and somebody were to drop you right in the middle, what mall are you at? It may have taken you a while to figure it out because the decor was the same. It had tile, it had fake plants, it had piped in music. Again, it had the guy banging on the organ, playing, whatever. And it was like they were so sort of, I say, generic and cookie cutter. But that was just sort of what we expected. I think that also made us kind of comfortable in that regard because it was all about comfort and knowing what the expectations were and just that sort of thing. And then knowing those stores that did have that, did have the record store was, with the special glass door, or the other materials that the video store that was, yes, you got to be 18 to go back through there. How about this? Let me ask you, you never found these in malls, but I don't think we ever discussed this at all. What about the standalone stores such as, and I think I can name one and you will recognize the name, and because it had a huge impact on my life and not for the reason you might think. There was a place called F Street bookstores. Now, I don't know if you remember F Street bookstores. I think the initial one was, yes, it was downtown. On what street was it? Well, it was on F Street. And you already touched on, pre-Horton Plaza where, there was about a block and a half of where you weren't taking your life in your own hands like you found out when you could go down, and that's where the F Street bookstore was. Now, F Street books, I don't think they sold a lot of books, okay? They sold, adult magazines. And then, yes, as soon as those videos came in, bam, they were right on the front end of the adult video, boom. It was that, and they sold some other things that as a kid, it was just like, I don't even know what that is, right? I don't even know what that's used for, and lamps and oils, and I think there was like a head shop component to it. For whatever reason, I had a friend who came across, for some reason, F Street bookstore, not fake, they were real, blank baptismal certificates, okay? Now, a baptismal certificate, at the time, they were blank, they were embossed with like a seal of California. I don't know how they ended up there. That was, at the time, a legal document, a legal form of ID. So I had a friend who I worked at the grocery store with, who he and like his buddy they bought a bunch of them and they sold them, right? Now, what could you do? That blank baptismal certificate sold at the F Street bookstore. We filled it out, typed up a name, a date that made me magically 21 years old.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Took that baptismal certificate, which was a forgery, bought it at an adult bookstore, took it to somewhere where I could get an official ID, and guess what? I did. I had a fake ID at the age of 19 that was an actual, well, it was a fake, but it was real. It was my picture with fake information. I had used that to all of a sudden, I was the 19-year-old guy with unfettered access to liquor stores and supermarkets.
How did you go from the baptismal certificate to the fake ID? Was there a place that would sell like a California ID where it wasn't a driver's license, it was just an ID? I don't get it.
No, I had to go to the DMV.
We went to the fucking DMV. Oh my God, Chris, that is legitimate fraud. Well done, sir. Oh, you weren't playing games, man.
I like to think it was a statute of limitations. Statute of limitations has, but yeah, it was.
Sure, you would.
It was an actual. I still have it. As a matter of fact, my daughter found it once, and it's like wondered why I had a different name.
Oh, Chris, now we have to know. What was your name?
Christopher Stephen Foster. I lived at 4168 Arizona Street, number 5, because I had to have someone. I had a fake address, or was actually addressed as somebody I worked with.
Christopher Stephen Foster.
I don't know how I came up with that. I went, but you went with just like you go with your own first name, so that way I would answer to it, right? And the thing is, it looked like a driver's license. It had the same logo, it had everything else, except it said in really small print, "This is not a license to drive." But nobody ever noticed that.
So what was it? A California ID?
It's a California ID.
Yeah, there's a difference between a driver's license and a California ID. And those were for people that still needed to show identification,
right?
But maybe they don't even have the ability to drive because they're disabled or elderly or whatever.
Senior citizens. Yeah, they stopped driving. They still want a photo ID. So I got this thing, and I went to the DMV and stood in line and wore like a nice collared shirt so I would look older.
Wow, you're a baller, Chris. Right on.
And I kept waiting for like the door, somebody to come bursting in and point a gun at me and pin me to the floor. And
yep, as they do sometimes at the DMV, it can happen.
Probably happens now. Thanks to one of those adult stores, and again, it was life changing to the point of like it became life changing where yes, I can go and buy beer, and then it was life changing to the point of like, somebody would call me or go, "Hey, Could you give me some beer? I'm meeting this girl."
Is that how they sounded usually, Chris?
Well, it was always because it was like they were always sort of sheepish, and they were always sort of the point of like they knew it's like, dude, it's 11 o'clock, right? It's like, really, you're gonna come pick me up, and we're gonna go down and I usually did it because I'd say, well, yeah, but you're gonna pay. You know what I mean? I was not, unless it was a close friend. It was some random guy. It's like, yeah, it's gonna cost you $10.
Now, Chris, why am I picturing you getting all dressed up for the evening with your girlfriend and your little Izod polo shirt with the popped collar and going to the Crab Catcher in La Jolla or one of the fancy restaurants? And because you have...
Wow, Crab Catcher.
Nice. Because you have your...
I love the Crab Catcher.
Because you have your ID, did they say things to you like, "Right this way, Mr. Foster. We have a table in back just for you, Mr. Foster. Will you be dining with us, Will you be having any of the drink selections this evening, Mr. Foster? We have an excellent Chianti." Was that the treatment you got with that California ID?
First of all, I didn't have a girlfriend hardly at the time. Ever.
Well, Chris, with the California ID, I think you missed a golden opportunity. They should have just been lining up.
I was like Sinatra. No, but again, it was like, but I could just go and buy beer and or whatever. And actually, you know what I did that I used several times is it allowed me to go. I had older friends, again, working in the grocery store. I had older friends and coworkers who were like, the early 20s, and they were going to see a show, the Bacchanal. The first time I went to the Belly Up, I was actually 19 years old, and I used my fake ID.
Wow,
and
nice.
And so that I used it for. It was like there was a joke. I think it was in the Breakfast Club, where the one nerdy guy had a fake ID, and they're like, "Why do you have a fake ID?" He's like, "So I could vote." I mean, that was the whole thing, and it was, and
oh, that was wasn't that Anthony Michael Hall? That sounds like something he would say. Yeah.
yeah, that was the punchline, right? So I could vote, right? That was the same thing. It's like I used it for the randomness of being able to go to Par Liquor or whatever, but also, oh, cool, yeah, I'll go. Like I said, I went to the Bacchanal, I went to the Belly Up, I went to the Casbah. What are those places when I literally was not technically old enough, and that was super cool. All thanks to the F Street bookstore.
So, Chris, it wasn't a license to drive, but it was a license to party. Would you agree?
That's completely what it was.
I just love the fact that you went to the DMV knowing what you were doing and still went through with it. And of course, it's the greatest thing ever, because at the DMV, you will never find a more disinterested, disengaged, lethargic, apathetic, I hate my job group. I mean, dude, as long as you have a pulse and everything seems to line up, I'm pretty convinced that you could get almost anything they offer at the DMV, right? They're not, this is not the front line of security against, terrorism and other acts of aggression against the U.S. This is the fucking DMV, right? Only to be bested by TSA, right? Guys that are in charge of America's security that 3 minutes ago used to be a shift leader, right, at Arby's.
Exactly. I was going to say Arby's. Excellent. It may have been at the time one of the most stressful things I ever went through, because again, I was there and like I said, I put on a nice shirt and tried to make myself look old. You remember when I was 19, I didn't look older than 19. And I remember just kind of standing in line and then watching, this lady who probably, probably couldn't wait for her smoke break. And I can still picture her. She had like this tight curl, sort of look like George Washington, and, like eyeglasses on this big chain around her neck. I don't think she ever looked me in the eye, but once I saw her, and she ran her thumb over my forged baptismal certificate and felt the embossed seal. And it was like, and just kind of grumbled, took my money, pointed in the direction, took my picture, boom. And then I went out of there, and I remember just like, again, looking around like, did
I just pull this off?
Did I pull it off? And 3 weeks later, when that came to address again, because again, it's like, well, I'm not going to send it to, my real house.
No, very smart.
And I sent it to, again, a coworker who was like a single mom. And I was like, can I use your address? And she's like, yeah, sure.
Well, hold on a second, Chris. Slow down on that story. Now, look, I'm not saying that anything had to happen back then, but we all saw movies like Valley Girl, right? Where the young guy is kind of like about to hook up with the super hot mom. And that was sort of a theme. We had Weird Science, which we've mentioned many, many times, where the young kids have literally built a woman, that is, mom age. And so the whole idea of the mom somehow hooking up with the teenage guy was a pretty common theme. So I guess here's my question to you. You've got this really cool ID. Man, you can now go drinking. And there is a single, I'm not a single mom, but there's a mom that works at the grocery store that's cool enough and hip enough to let you send your fake ID to her house. Chris, you never dated this woman. You didn't live the 1980s ideal. No? Did I take it too far?
I'm going to have to take the fifth on that one. No, I didn't. No, it was really it never really kind of crossed my mind.
All right. Just an 80s thing to do, I guess. Yeah.
Right. It was an 80s trope. We've already talked about those films, a little bit. We've hit on them. And no, it was the equivalent of like, well, I'm using this so I can vote. It was just like, no.
Well, you're a good man.
Right. I can go and get a few beers, and I can go and see Southside Johnny and the Jukes at the Belly Up, or Lone Justice at the Bacchanal, which were actual shows. Right. So it was just like, no. And maybe, was I naive? I don't know. Maybe I was naive.
Now, Chris, looking back, I was just going to say, looking back on it, were there signals? Were there possible signs when she said, yes, Chris, you can send your fake ID to my house, but you're going to have to pick it up Friday night at around 10:30 when my kids are gone. Is that a possible scenario that you just sort of overlook?
Don't try to meld my backstory into, no, it didn't happen. Did I want it to happen? I don't know what I want to happen. Are we going to get into this? I can't talk about what I wanted to happen when I was 19. I don't know if I remember what I wanted to happen when I was 19. No, it didn't happen.
You're getting awfully fidgety, Chris. It sounds like something went on there. I think we're going to have to carry this over into a future episode. I think this is definitely warranted. But hey, man, we actually went over, I think, 250 different topics on this episode.
Something like that.
I really feel like this one is action-packed, man. The mall, we got the video library, we got the Blockbuster, we got the weirdness of going into the adult section, right? We've got the food court, we've got shopping back then, we've got posters, we've got buying albums, we've got, what else, Chris? Help me. What did I miss?
Multiple references to Heather Thomas.
Yep.
Orange Julius, although I said Strawberry Julius.
Yep.
Absolutely. That guy banging out, Crystal Gale hits with, trying to sell just that one piano or organ of the week.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of pulls from a lot of different directions. And yes, I had a fake ID, and I guess I got away with it.
Well, up until now, Chris, but we do live in a different era. Everything is now parsed out by AI and goes straight to, I'm pretty sure, Elon Musk. So anything's possible. You may be getting a letter letting you know that you are fired from a job that you don't even have. You may not even have that job, Chris, and you're fired.
Or there's a long, detailed rap sheet for my alter ego, Christopher Stephen Foster, 4168 Arizona Street, number 5, San Diego, California, 92105.
That's right. Wow. Let's leave it right there, Chris. That is amazing that you still have that locked and loaded in your memory. Well, Mr. Foster, until next time.
Until next time, Jeff.